Like honey. Did you know that the name of the tagline for B movie is "Honey Just Got Funny"?
Oh God, why are you trying to make us angry right before we do it?
You gotta leave that in.
Balls, dude. That's terrible.
You guys know that?
Yeah.
Hey everybody, we're here at a frame rate. Wow, it's so great. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Abe Epperson, and I'm joined here with my co-host. Introduce yourself.
Wow, Michael Swaim. I love that sound, dude. That's our new sound.
Wow. We're the guys, I guess now. We're joined for an animal-themed frame rate. Doesn't really have a reason why we did this, other than we just love our friend.
I'm the friend. I am Katie Goldin. I host Creature Feature, a podcast about animals. And yeah, Abe and Michael are my friends.
If we were good hosts, we would have said friends. That. Yeah, Creature Feature Pod. Check it out. It rules. And it ties into our topic for the day, because our topic is usually... I mean, honestly, Katie, we usually go with really top-tier movies about humans, like Whiplash, Nightcrawler, stuff like that. But we decided to do a very different kind of movie in honor of your appearance. Why don't you tell the folks what we're covering today?
B-movie.
Yes. B-movie. As I said when we found out what we were doing, fine, B-movie. I guess I'll watch you. And
yeah,
I did.
Yeah, I watched it for the first time. Other than like obviously the YouTube ones where it's like B-movie, but every time they say bees, it gets sped up like by twice or something. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly the best way to watch it, because when you watch it in regular speed, it's not a fun experience.
At regular normal viewing speed.
But
it really is a meme movie because it's so bad, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why it hooked in? Because that's the thing Abe taught me. I don't know, some memes find me and some memes completely miss me. I didn't realize B-movie was so memed, but it definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all like jazz?
Yeah, the opening crawl is probably the most famous of the memes.
Yeah, I think because it immediately establishes how stupid this movie is, right? The opening crawl, for those of you who are blessedly uninitiated, is, quote, "According to all known laws of aviation, there is no way a bee should be able to fly. Its wings are too small to get its fat little body off the ground. The bee, of course, flies anyway, because bees don't care what humans think is impossible." Now,
which is also just structurally, that is not the moral that the movie ends on either.
No.
They lose that thread. But anyway, go on.
They lose that thread, and the thread is fucking nothing.
Sure.
Oh, can I curse in the show? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Curse up a storm, you sailor.
Especially, I mean, how dare... It's a movie about a bee trying to fuck a human, so...
Well, it is,
If they're going to present that to children, we can say fuck, you know?
We can and should, and I actually have a point about that I do want to get to eventually. But in terms of this opening crawl... I've never heard of this even being an old wives' tale. You know, like there are a lot of misconceptions about animals, but this isn't anything, right? It's nothing.
I think it's just invented for that like animation-esque, like, oh, the moral of the story is you can do whatever you want to do, which is almost like all animated movies.
Yes, but in order to do that, they made something up about bees that I have also, and maybe we're all ignorant, but I have never encountered anyone saying that about bees. I don't think that's a thing.
No, it's not
I don't think it's a thing.
It's not a thing. It's not an old wives' tale. It's not a misconception. It's a complete made up, like, oh, we all, like, everyone knows bees shouldn't be able to fly. It's like, what are you? No. I mean, first of all, it says... to all known laws of aviation, which laws of aviation is a legal term, not physics.
Sure.
Right.
It's not like laws of aviation are like you can't fly a drone within 5 miles of an airport.
Can I just say, I thought Katie was going to bring a lot of information about what bees are actually like. I love that you're dialing in on the word choice, like the diction.
Well,
you're right. The laws of aviation are completely unrelated to Etymology. Entomology?
Right.
Entomology.
Etymology and etymology,
they want to
both of them.
say laws of physics based off of the intention that I'm perceiving.
Or laws of aerodynamics. Like that would work. Maybe that's what they meant. Work.
There still isn't. I mean, I guess there could be laws. Someone made a law of aerodynamics, but it's physics is what they mean to say. It's too heavy. They can't create lift.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not. But it's nothing. But it isn't anything. And obviously, there's nothing about bees, intrinsically or otherwise that would mean they couldn't fly. They're very lightweight. Their wings are big enough. It doesn't make any, it just doesn't. I don't know where they got this. It made me so angry.
If you Google how do bees fly, the top thing is an article that says bumblebee flight does not violate the laws of physics.
Right.
It just explains that it's bullshit.
Because the internet is like a compendium of what is reaction to things that are popular or most known, not true. Right?
Yeah.
So they're reacting to Bee Movie. They're not reacting to any one saying out of nowhere or as a, old wives' tale or whatnot. That bees can't fly actually?
Right.
I've heard
it's
dogs
magic.
Can't look up, and I've heard a duck's quack doesn't echo, but never bees can't fly.
Right. And of course, both of those things aren't true, right?
Right.
But if an animated movie was like ducks quacks can't echo, it's like, okay, so you're basing it on an old wives' tale, a dumb one, but, an old wives' tale nonetheless. Or like dogs can't look up, and then you have a movie about a dog who looks up
Finally
in order
looks
to
up and saves the village.
Saves everyone from a meteor or something.
My God.
At least it's already established old wives' tale, right? But this is just like, hey, you guys know the old wives' tale where bees can't fly? It's like, no, that's nothing. It's not anything. You can't just make up your own old wives' tale for your movie about bad, dumb bees.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think normally, we also watched, just in preparation for this, Antz and A Bug's Life, or at least I did. I also watched Zootopia, but I don't think it'll come up because there were no bugs in it.
I've seen Zootopia too. Yeah,
sure.
So
it's just interesting that Bug's Life and Antz both play on the thing you expect them to play on, which is ants are a hive mind. So it's a story about finding your individuality. The thing a human would want to do if they were an ant. And bees, that's true too. Hive mind almost literally is most closely associated with bees, right? Beehive is the most common hive. And yet that is not the arc they chose to go with.
No.
They chose to go with Jerry Seinfeld as a bee is in love with a human woman, and that is what we need to accept. That's the thing that breaks.
Actually, that's the result of the plot. The plot is actually about bees finding out that humans for centuries have been stealing their honey and using it.
I guess that's
but
true.
It's actually,
God, do you remember that the middle act of this movie is a trial? Why is 25 minutes of this movie a trial?
Here's the sad part is you're both right. Those are both the plots of the movie, in addition to the plot being Jerry Seinfeld doesn't want one job for the rest of his life and is sad about it, which never gets a resolution at the end. It starts out with him, his whole sort of motivation is that, I have to pick a job and be with it the rest of my life. And he's sad about it, which, okay, reasonable, right? That would suck if you have to pick one job.
Also, is that how bees function? Is that part accurate?
No, actually. So here's a bee fact. I'll just pepper in real bee facts.
Please, that's what I was hoping for.
In the movie, it's you got to pick your job, and you're stuck with it the rest of your life until you die. Bees do a bunch of different things in a hive. So beehives are eusocial, meaning it's got this kind of social structure in which different bees have different tasks. The only thing that the bees are born with and that you can't change is, whether they are queen bees, the mating bees, or worker bees. So there are some queen bees, and then the worker bees. There's typically just one main queen bee in the hive, and then the other queen bees will go off and disperse. The worker bees have all sorts of jobs that they do, like nursing, cell cleaning, going outside and gathering nectar and pollen. But they do every job throughout their whole lifetime. So the job that they do depends on their age. So like when they're really young, they basically do some cell cleaning, and they'll do like nursing also when they're younger. But then when they're older, then they will go outside of the hive and collect things. So it's based on their maturity, which makes sense because, like, you know, when you're younger, you're, you know, probably not as strong as when you get older. And then, so yeah, it's basically the opposite of the whole motivating plot in a bee movie, which is like, oh, you're stuck with one job your whole life. In real bee colonies, it's actually quite interesting. They do all the jobs. Also, they're all female. So
yeah, I was going to ask about the gender ratio, because in this movie, it's human, right? It's nuclear family. Like you pointed out in your notes, he has a mother and father, which doesn't even make sense according to their own logic, because they also have a queen. So why would he have a mother and father?
They kind of jokingly point to that in the trial scene again, this movie's plot, maybe we should just like lay out the basic plot so people can follow it. B. Jerry Seinfeld is upset that he only gets to do one job his whole life. So instead of picking a job, he goes and flies with the pollen jocks, which are all male bees who go and collect pollen, which is, again, they would all be female because all the worker bees in a colony are female and they're sisters. Anyway, so he goes out, he sees a woman he really wants to fuck, and then he's like, oh man, I really want to fuck this lady. Human woman. Yep. Because she saves his life, and then he's like, bee boner. And then he finds out, oh no, humans are eating honey. And then he finds out it's because of honey farms where bees are kept and like smoked out. And he's like, oh, that's terrible. And then he like, I'm going to sue the humans. And then he sues the humans and wins this like dumb court trial. And
what
then like
turn.
the humans can't.
I'm sorry, just that the turn is, I'm going to sue them. That was the moment where I was like, what is this movie? This is insanity.
Yeah.
And I love that humans go with it, too.
They're like, yeah, there's a legal structure for that, apparently.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Goodman basically does a character assassination on bees in order to try to win. To say, like, all bees just want to do is sting. You know, and it's like, people are like, oh, yeah, that's true. Bees are bad.
There were a lot of like weird. There are also like a lot of weird sort of. I hate it when these animal movies are like, here's a sort of like coy reference to racism, but it's always super awkward because it's like, oh, mosquitoes are discriminated against. It's like, yeah, because mosquitoes, you know, are actually a parasite, are a pest, and then to like make it like, oh, like this is like discrimination. It's like that's not how that works, right? Like it's the Zootopia problem of like, you know, being bigoted against other species rather than being bigoted against like the same species. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, because it's
kind
like
of a typical fairy tale thing.
It is a thing, though. For example, I'm rewatching Star Trek: The Next Generation right now, which I always am at any given point, and the Klingons, like I would argue the Klingons' existence is super problematic. It dates back to the original series, but it's like always played by black actors, and Data will be like to Picard, well, you know, Klingons are genetically predisposed to violence. And you're like,
oh god,
it's you're using it as a metaphor for racism,
right?
But you're treating it as if the other race is a different species, which is the whole point of racism. Is that's not true,
right?
We're all the same species.
I like how they don't even bother to have a moral point with the space Jews, the Ferengi. Which
oh my god, the Ferengi are so problematic.
So as
and that falls into B movie. B movie is I was shocked. God. I guess I shouldn't have been shocked because it's Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah. Incidentally, by the way, B movie Jerry Seinfeld is named Barry Beinfeld, I guess.
Barry B. Benson.
Barry B. Benson. But it's super Semitic, isn't it? The movie makes so many Jewish jokes. It gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, as a woman of Jewish descent, it's uncomfortable. It's like really forcing in these like. There's this joke where Barry B. Benson's parents find out he's dating someone. They don't realize it's a bee wanting to fuck a human, and his bee mom, again, what the fuck? His bee mom is like, oh, I hope she's bee-ish. Like that's like, you know, the joke, because like I hope she's Jewish, which is, you know. Okay,
they're having fun.
We're having fun
Seinfeld's
here.
having fun again.
Yeah, I mean, which, you know, it's one of these things where, like, also for me, like, I'm like half Jewish, so my dad's Jewish, my mom is not Jewish, and so this kind of like, there's a lot of like weird stuff that about like Jewish dating and like. Anyways, it gets into a very complicated thing, and it's kind of uncomfortable, and it's just weird to have a movie and these bees saying that. It's just weird. I don't like it.
Yeah, I thought it was odd. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. You think it's odd because
for an adult audience, it's not that racy of a joke. But for a kid's movie, you're like, that was odd.
Yeah, it's weird. So anyways, after the court trial, the bees win. And then it's like, okay, humans can't have your honey. You get your honey back. And then so all the bees stop working, because in this metaphor, where bees are basically enslaved by humans who take their labor with no compensation, it's bad when they get the means of production back, because then they stop working and they turn into lazy pieces of shit.
Which makes no sense.
Right, it doesn't make any sense.
They were doing it before, not even knowing that there was a problem. Like, they were just being bees. Right.
I mean, the idea is like, okay, so honey is a thinly, stupidly veiled metaphor for money. Did you get it? Honey, money, get it?
See, I thought honey just got funny, but it's actually honey is money. We got it.
So basically,
I'm sorry. I know I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't get it.
Oh.
No, okay, Michael. I get it. No, move on.
We're just going to put up as many stops as possible.
The metaphors are too veiled.
I just wanted to make you explain to me for 3 to 5 minutes. No, the honey is the money. The bones are the money.
The honey is the money. What's up with that? Yeah, no, it's stupid. But so this idea is that, like, these laborers, right? So God, I can't begin to explain how stupid the morals are in this movie, because here you have one decent moral point, right? Humans, so if bees are sentient, right? Humans are exploiting their labor without compensating them in bee slavery, where they're literally kept in like bee work camps and smoked. Another thing that
I love it. They make the beekeepers. I would love in life to find any beekeeper who is like evilly gleeful about, I'm fucking these bees over, man. I take all their honey. I control them. I get off on it, dude. All the beekeepers in this movie are like Cruella de Vil, but a beekeeper. Right. They're like, yeah, we bend the bees to our will.
We must torment the bees.
Yeah. In fact, probably it's quite the opposite, where people who keep apiaries, which is where you keep bees, like, are obsessively concerned about every bee's health. You like, someone who keeps an apiary, like, they see one dead bee and they go on full blown panic mode, because like you don't want your bees to die. It's actually incredibly difficult to keep bees and to make sure their colony is healthy. And so like they're very, very concerned about keeping all the bees healthy. And also, so I'll get back to some of the like actual bee facts, but just to cap off the stupid summary of this movie, it's like the moral point they're making is like keeping sentient beings, fully cognizant, human level intelligence beings in prison and stealing their honey is bad. No, that's a good point. Then they backtrack on it where it's like, oh, but once they win the court case, you dumbasses who didn't want to be slaves anymore, turns out when you get to keep all your honey, you just stop working and you kill the planet by not pollinating flowers anymore.
Everyone in their place. Yeah.
It's the dumbest, like, capitalist propaganda thing I've ever seen, where it's like, oh, well, if you get to keep your labor, you'll just stop working. As if that makes any sense at all. Like, in real life, when you take honey away from like, the whole point, okay, first of all, I'm sorry, in the logic of the movie, the problem with the humans taking the honey was that the bees worked until they died. They like worked and worked and worked until they died. So they were overworked. And so when they get the honey back, it's like, then they stop working. But if you were overworked, you wouldn't have to stop working. You would just not have to be overworked, which is the case like for actual real life bees need all the honey they make. And so when you collect honey from a beehive, if you have an apiary, you actually have to replace some of it with sugar or some kind of like bee food made out of like a sort of sugar mixture because the bees need it for nutrition. So it's actually, and like there are arguments where it's like, this is actually not super healthy, like the healthiest thing for bees to replace their honey with a sugar substitute, which is true. But like that is, it's like, so when we do collect honey from bees, it's not completely without any cost to the bees. It just, so
it's the cost of us getting honey.
Right. And so, it's like it is, we do literally exploit bees for their honey. But, it's like there's a lot of arguments about like, well, but if we keep breeding the bees and giving them homes and like trying to increase the population of bees, even though we take some of their honey, potentially like by introducing a bunch more bees to the environment is not necessarily a bad thing for the balance. Like actually honeybees are not native to the US. There are a bunch of native species of bees that are not honeybees that do not produce honey, but honeybees are actually an introduced species that are domesticated. They're technically invasive, but they end up not being too bad for the environment. It is arguable whether they're good for native species of bees. Like, I think a lot of attention is paid to like bees, like honeybees suffering because everybody likes honeybees
and we know what they do, or we have an understanding of like, yeah, they make the honey and they pollinate the flowers. We love them. Actually,
but like
other
a lot
bees,
of
we don't know what they're up to.
Well, there's murder hornets on the loose, man.
Oh God, yeah, that's pretty scary. But we don't want those in the U.S. because our native bees, both the domesticated honeybees and our native bee populations, do not know how to defend themselves from murder hornets. So that's the problem. But native bees do actually do a lot of good stuff for the environment. They're really good pollinators. They're actually often better pollinators than bees. They're native bee species where like each individual native bee is much better at pollinating than an individual honeybee. But honeybees have a leg up on a lot of native bee species because honeybees have that hive structure, whereas a lot of native bees are actually not in hive structures. They're individual bees. They all each individually mate and breed. And they can be, social, like live in big sort of apartment clusters, but they're not eusocial like bees where they have a hive structure and there's like one mating queen and they all work together.
They still pollinate, I gather from what you're saying. Do they make honey, or do only honeybees make honey?
Only honeybees make honey.
That was a dumb question in retrospect, but
no,
that's
actually
fascinating to me because I always thought like, because recently, and I'm sure it's still true, we were panicking in the news about like bees are gone. This is the end of the world. The bees are all dying. And I always associate that in my mind with the friendly fuzzy honeybee. Like we need a lot of those. We need those everywhere. It sounds like we don't necessarily. We need the native bees that live in each area to repopulate. Is that closer to the truth?
We need both, I think. I mean, honeybees are great, but like definitely we need native bees. They're really good to and important. And of course, anytime you have like an introduced species to an area, you risk it upsetting the very delicate ecological balance. I think at this point, the honeybees have been in the U.S. long enough that I don't think it would be good for them to now not be in the population. I'm not no expert in terms of the balance of honeybees per native bees in the U.S., but there are other species of hive bees that produce honey other than our honeybee that we know about. There's actually a bee that produces like this psychotropic honey, I think in Nepal. It's really interesting. Yeah. And like people have to climb up, and you have to climb up like this mountainside and like use this like smoke to subdue the bees. And their stings really hurt, like I think even more than honeybees. But it like, because the bees I think feed on some kind of fungus. Oh god, I hope I'm right about this. I didn't write any notes about it, but I think the bees feed on a fungus that creates this, so that when they make this honey, it's actually this like red honey that has like this psychotropic property. It's just extremely difficult to collect. But yeah, so there are other, like there are multiple bee species that produce honey, but you know, there are a lot of, I think most of the US's native species do not, I don't know of any like indigenous species in North America that actually produces honey, at least on the level that honeybees do. They do sometimes, like they'll collect even individual bees will collect pollen and nectar and create sort of these like sugary balls of food for their young, which is pretty cute. But anyways, back to Bee Movie. If we must. See, this is what I'm saying though, like actual bees are so much more interesting. This is what makes me so angry when insect movies don't really pay attention to evolutionary biology. There are so many more interesting plot points that you could do just by following actual kind of bee behavior a little more closely. Because like, again, the Bee Movie plot, you have these like 3 plots, right? Like number 1, B. Seinfeld doesn't want to be stuck with one boring job the rest of his life. Also, side plot to that plot is like he wants to be a pollen jock, and it almost seems like it's setting it up to be like, oh, he's just sort of this like small scrawny bee and he can't be a pollen jock and that's unfair. But actually, like, there's nothing that seems to indicate he couldn't choose to have that job. Like that he couldn't sign up to be a pollen jock. In fact, when he sneaks off and goes out with them, they're all extremely nice to him and welcoming. Like the extent to their bullying is like in the opening scene, one of them sees him pretend to be a pollen jock to impress the ladies. Again, weird, because they would all be siblings. In fact, none of the pollen jocks would be male. They'd all be female. They'd all be sisters, and they wouldn't be hitting on each other because yuck. Anyways, so like, but they see him pretend to be a pollen jock. He's hitting on these, I guess, his cousins in the movie. It doesn't, whatever. And then like, instead of like being like, you're not a pollen jock and humiliating him, they're like, hey, you want to meet us like tomorrow at this time and like, you know, like go see what you're really made of. Okay. Like, that's actually a nice thing to do. Right. And then he goes and joins them, and they like show him the ropes, and they're really nice to him, and then try to save him when he gets stuck to a tennis ball. So like, there's no conflict there. He could just join them, and it seems like they'd be fine with that. Like he enjoys being he enjoys doing this, like the pollen jocks collect the pollen and collect the nectar. Again, like I explained, dumb, bad biology, but in the logic of the movie, he could have just done that. There's no conflict there. Yeah, it's so a worse version of the Futurama pilot. Incidentally, I have to shout this out. If anyone out there is a big Futurama fan, every plot line in this is stolen from Futurama, including the hyper chicken lawyer. Like I was just watching Bee Movie being like, this is these 4 episodes of Futurama put together. I don't know what it means, but it means something, including the episode with the giant space bees, which was more accurate than this is, even though they were space bees. They actually, because they have the psychotropic honey in that, actually, they're not all too getting inaccurate. Fucked up.
That's true. 3 spoonfuls to sleep forever or whatever.
God, that was dark.
It was.
That show got dark.
I think B movies dark. Especially, I thought it was a crazy idea that the woman that the bee falls in love with is married when they meet.
Is she? Yeah. I can't tell.
To Patrick Warburton,
at least
right?
dating Patrick Warburton.
Dating, I think.
Okay, so here's a question, Katie. Do
Yeah.
bees have genitals that are analogous to ours? How do they mate? Like, does something that
bees-
sticks out go into something that sticks in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, bees have a penis that explodes and then they die.
Just like the stinger,
So
man.
just like us.
They're big.
No.
They're big on like the one move and you're done.
Male bees do not. Male bees do not have stingers. Male bees are called drones.
Mm-hmm.
They are not found. There's like maybe 100 male bees to like every like 10,000 female bees. I don't know if I got that proportion quite right, but yeah, it's like there's not that many male bees compared to female bees. Male bees, like when you see bees out in the field, you know, like sipping on nectar, going around doing their bee business, those are all female bees. They're probably all sisters. And the male bees' only function in life is to fuck and die. They fuck off and die. Hashtag feminism. But
yeah, right.
They are born. Once they reach sexual maturity, they will go off into the world and go to a mating location. They will mate with a female queen, a virgin female queen, and not always. Sorry, you could cut that out. It's not always a virgin female queen. Look, I don't want to like slut shame bees on this shows. Yeah. But so they go.
But that bee's been around the bee block, if you know what I'm saying. She's no virgin queen. She's not wearing white.
Town bee bike.
She's wearing black and yellow.
But yeah, so the males will go off. They will mate with females far away from the colony, typically because if they accidentally mate with someone they're related to, it creates weird brood that the worker bees have to then cannibalize to get rid of all the weird mutant bees.
Good band
just
name,
like us.
Weird
it's
brood.
just like humans. Wow.
Yeah, just like in Bee Movie. But like,
you know, your dick explodes, you eat your kids, human stuff.
Right. You eat your inbred kids. But yeah, so the males will go. They will go to and they will mate midair. And basically, what happens is the male's penis, in order to inseminate the female, their penis will literally explode and tear off their body. And in fact, if you like listen real closely, you can hear like a little popping sound. And then the bee
that's amazing.
After the bee's dick explodes, it falls to the ground and dies. So basically, if in this movie, Jerry Seinfeld wanted to mate with this human, he's got one shot and then he's dead.
What's the deal with our dicks exploding?
Why not make the whole bee out of the exploding dick? Okay, that's incredible. I'm very pleased to know that.
I'm very pleased to know that as well. Yeah, so something I wanted to talk about a little bit more is
exploding
also
dicks.
Sure, yeah. Forget what I was gonna say.
No, sorry, go on.
No, there's something very. It seems very simple, but I think it's very interesting that a lot of these bug movies, especially animated bug movies, because I don't think that there's live action bug movies really.
Microcosmos is very good.
Yeah, but the ones that do build like a microcosm out of like a human-like society. So Antz, A Bug's Life, Bee Movie. They're usually bugs and insects. Typically, we consider them automatons. You know, like they're just
the story's usually about
mindless.
Individuality versus communism, which is why it's so funny that Bee Movie sides with like rampant capitalism.
Right. It's like the human methodology is correct, but let's just bring it to bees. Kind of like a manifest destiny of individualism, which is interesting. But when you look at like Antz and Bug's Life, and we don't need to go into specifics, but if you just watch like the first 30 minutes, you get of each of those films, you get like basically the world that they're painting. And the world that they're painting are almost always like, you have one role, you do your role, and you just do it, and there's nothing else. And when someone says something like, "But don't you wish if there was more?" They're usually scoffed at and seen as, you know, why would you? It's not screw you for thinking that. It's why would you think about that? No one is thinking about this, which makes our protagonists like kind of bug artists, you know, like it's that trope where they're seeing something from a different perspective that no one else.
The only individual in a society of conformists.
Yeah, exactly. They all are seen as like this one unique person in the society of just like real shitty, like just workers, I guess. They're often all workers and they know their role. And in like, I guess A Bug's Life, he's like kind of, isn't in Bug's Life, he is a...
Flick, you mean?
Literal inventor. He's a literal inventor.
An entrepreneur.
Which means that he does kind of perceive the world in a different way because he kind of like uses science. It's very interesting to me that Seinfeld would approach this movie with, at the end of the movie, he becomes a lawyer to kind of bridge humans and animals together. Mm-hmm. Like he's just another part of the system. The system itself is about being more human-like.
Right.
A Bug's Life is not that. A Bug's Life is how can we become ourselves, and I'm going to have to kind of think outside the box in order for us to get there. That's such a different intention in the movie, even though they both present the problem being, here's a system of conformity that needs to kind of like quote unquote be stopped, which I'm fine to allow. Again, children's films do that a lot. WALL-E, one of my favorite movies in this genre, is about that as well. But yeah, B movie. Well,
in a lot of ways, insects are like robots to us for storytelling purposes.
For storytelling purposes. I just find that if you have the same kind of starting place with these two movies, and it's interesting to me that Pixar went as opposite in the direction that a B movie went, and that was made in 1998. This was made in 2007.
I guess
I'm glad we're moving into A Bug's Life because I love A Bug's Life, and I really want to know how accurate it is as far as ant stuff goes.
Sure.
But it is interesting that, or Abe just points out, Flick is an inventor, and that's true. By the end of A Bug's Life, they're all using his grain harvester machine made out of leaves and twigs. And I guess that saddens me to realize, because one of my gripes about B movie is that it presents everything as realistic, and yet inside the hive they use jetpacks and shit. And like they use pneumatic tubes to store the honey. And the idea is, first of all, okay, we haven't even chanced upon what I think is the most egregious idea in B movie, which is that bees can speak English and just choose not to.
Right.
It just so happens that no human has overheard a bee speaking. That's insane.
Right, like
even
it's a rule.
Kid. Yeah.
Even and like none of the bees in like the prison bee colony, which again, please don't do that just as a flippant joke in a kids movie. Like, but yeah, these like laborers in a prison bee colony like don't talk to their captors and say like, hey, yeah, we're actually completely sentient.
We're fully human level intelligence.
Yeah. So this is messed up. Please don't do this. Yeah, I would like to. So I feel like for these three movies, so with B movie obviously is a stinking heap of crap, but you can trace the problems with this movie beyond just like the inaccuracies, because I feel like, you know, like biological inaccuracy does not make a bad movie. But the central plot, which I guess there are three like plots that are all terrible, but the morality of the movie is an Ouroboros. Anytime you have a movie where basically the end is like going back to the beginning, like things were fine at the beginning except with minor tweaks, I would say there's never been a good movie that I can think of where at the end they're like, oh, actually all the morals all the problems were not really real problems and could be solved with some minor bureaucratic tweaks. Like
that's what's crazy about B-movie is that the happy ending is that the main character accepts the propaganda of his society. Right. Yeah, it's that he buys into the system.
He doesn't actually change anything.
No, he accepts the system as it was at the beginning.
The only thing he changes is that he's also a lawyer. Like, he gets to have two jobs.
It's just random. He's also a lawyer now.
Right.
Okay, I guess shit is resolved.
So this is like real, like, capitalist neoliberal fail propaganda. When you look at Antz in A Bug's Life, so Antz is, I kind of dislike that movie, but it is, when you actually look at the sort of plot of the movie, it is at least a linear plot. Like, it does what you expect.
Right. Yeah, it does the story of, everyone's a zombie, I want to be an individual, and you get there. Yeah.
And you go to point B. Point A is like, it's bad that we're in a police state where everyone's a conformist, and point B is like, it's good to be individuals and think for yourselves, but also work together. And also kidnap a woman, and then she'll fall in love with you because, of course, because Woody Allen's in it. And it's disgusting.
I've played video games. I know how romance works.
Which, whatever, fine. But A Bug's Life does the correct thing, which is an actual arc to the plot. It starts at point A, it goes to point B, and then goes to point C. Because it's like, starts out where Flick is like, I'm trying to help by being an individual, and the colony is like, no, you can't do this, and actually the problem in this movie is not just that they're all conformists, it's that they are actually oppressed by a force, the grasshoppers, who are oppressing them, exploiting them for their labor, and taking all their food. Sort of like a B movie, but doesn't suck, because you have a problem, and their solution to it is the ending of a B movie, which is just continue to allow your labor to be exploited, because workers are lazy if they get to own the means of production and own the fruits of their labor.
Yeah.
Bug's Life actually is it's also loosely based on Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven, which we should mention. But I made a note the structural note I made was like, Act 1 is go out and get heroes. Act 2 is retain the heroes, keep them because they want to leave. And Act 3 is join the heroes and become a hero yourself. And that's just beautiful. It's very efficient, and that's a great storytelling cycle that really works.
Exactly. And it's, so that's like, and it's also nice because it's a layered plot. So you have that layer, right? You go out, you have the circus troops, which is, I love this movie, even though there are some inaccuracies, it has some great elements to it. The circus troupe of a variety of different insects is wonderful. The stick bug, I love it. Of course, it's voiced by not Frasier, but the guy
Niles. What's his name?
He's a stick, stupid. You hit bugs with him.
And the stag beetle and the black widow. It's wonderful. I love the sort of, like, when you take a variety of animals and anthropomorphize them. I understand that the ladybug. It's interesting because the ladybug thing, I think, for the time there was a subversiveness to it, where it is a feminine ladybug who
this is Dennis Leary, if you haven't seen it in a while. And it's weird because you can tell that at the time it was meant as a pro, like, guys can be in touch with their feminine side move. By today's standards, it reads as transphobic, and that is interesting. At the time I think it was transgressive, but obviously now I think when you look at it, it's like kind of it doesn't hit the right tone. But I do think it was clumsily making this point of, like, I mean, I don't know, it was like, oh, you can't, somehow these bugs assumed like he was a woman because he's a ladybug, and that causes this friction and these problems. And I think it's interesting because had these concepts, if these, like, with animals, because gender is so interesting and, like, not human like with animals,
or I should say sex, because gender is really a human construct, but sex with animals is very, very interesting, very fluid, very cool. And exploring that in a movie where you have non-human animals, I think is really interesting. I don't, like, obviously I think to today's standards, like A Bug's Life, that whole element doesn't really hold up. It doesn't read right, but at least, it's like, it's at least an interesting thing to like, if in the like, again, instead of just like making bug society be a patriarchy where all the workers are male and it's just like, just mimicking human society, why not go with some of the interesting things about these animals in nature and use that as constraints for your plot, and then maybe you'll actually have an interesting plot.
Oh, and your queens are Phyllis Diller and Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Amazing.
Top tier.
I mean, in terms, and then like, so you have that subplot of them going out, finding the heroes, retaining the heroes, and then joining the heroes. You also have the plot of Flick doesn't fit in because he thinks differently. Then it turns out like he goes away, he comes back with the heroes, but then it turns out he's not the only one in the colony that thinks differently, and he's encouraging all of the ants in the colony to express their creativity, from Dot to what's her name? Ada is the princess, and then you have the thespians, and it turns out they actually all have a lot of creativity. So what I like about this movie is Flick is actually not the only ant that thinks for himself. He's just the impetus for the other ants to also think in terms of their own kind of creativity and thoughts and ideas. Like there's a scene where Ada actually, rescues Flick and she's not just a passive, like all the other ants aren't just passive actors, numbly accepting this idea, like we're like that joke in The Holy Grail, like we're all individuals, because that's kind of an oxymoron.
I thought we were an autonomous collective.
That's sort of an oxymoron in these other movies where it's like a B movie or Antz, where it's like, oh, we can't think for ourselves, and then it's like, yes, you can, and they're like, okay, we'll now follow you, Messiah Ant, or Messiah Bee. Well, in A Bug's Life, while Flick is sort of the main innovator, like there are the other ants, like the whole, this group of the little ant Girl Scouts all create this flying bird. I think it was Flick's idea, but them being a part of it,
they all support him. Yeah,
and
they built it together is the key. The entire colony plus the troop built it together using their own specific utilities. Like the big bug is like got stuff on his back, but like he also flies. Like they all have something to bring to the table. Yeah, which is kind of, I guess that's my main thing about what the difference between these movies is that whereas in other bug movies, like Bee Movie, the oppression seems to come out of the backward society of like the natural quote unquote order of bugs, which is something that would make sense, of course, to Jerry Seinfeld, who's just like, going to campuses and saying like, oh, empathy is bullshit. In this movie, with empathy? The thing in Bugs movie, the thing is that Kevin Spacey, who plays Hopper, who's the leader of the Grasshopper gang,
and Richard Kind, equally terrifying,
has essentially forced through like the concept that might equals right, has forced all of the colony on Ant Island to believe that the natural order of things is that they serve grasshoppers.
It is inverting.
So it's
I gotta point
bastardization of what naturally ants ought to be. Whereas when you go to Bee Movie, it's about why bees are flawed.
Right, but may I point out that Bug's Life is based on, it's heavily inferred, the myth of the ant and the grasshopper. The ants save up while the grasshoppers are lazy and steal. So it's literally the opposite of Bee Movie, which is based on the idea that bees can't fly, which is not true and one's ever heard. But Ant and the Grasshopper is a classic old tale.
Yeah,
that totally makes sense.
It's an interesting sort of reimagining of the Ant and the Grasshopper. And then like the other thing is, again, like at the end of the movie, the conclusion is not just that it's not, individuality is better than collectivism. It's actually that, individuality is important for collectivism. Mm-hmm. Thinking for yourself and valuing each individual is actually important when we collectively rise up against our oppressors, the grasshoppers who demand that the ants give them food. Because, like, I think at the beginning of the film, like, the ants get the food, we take the food, and that's the natural order of things. And it's kind of interesting in that a lot of these like bug and animal movies like end up being weird capitalist propaganda where it's like, you don't want, like, communism is bad because you have bees and bees are communists or something stupid like that.
Right.
But then,
and I think, sorry, but
no,
just, it's also notable, I think, that Bee Movie is a vehicle for Jerry Seinfeld and Antz is a vehicle for Woody Allen. And Bug's Life is not a vehicle for Dave Foley. It's movie.
Not?
He is not the draw. But you know what I mean.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Is probably the biggest draw. But it's the story above everything. The story is not above the star, whereas I think in the other two, the star is above the story. Yeah,
which is weirdly kind of ties into the ethos of the other movies, which is that the genius innovator, the Bee Bezos, rises above all because he's just so smart and so much better than all these other conformists, and he will save bee society. Whereas in A Bug's Life, it's that innovators are good, but they need the help of the other colony. And once the whole colony actually, comes to this realization, they don't actually come to the realization that Flick is good just because he's so smart and clever and convinces them. They start to be on his side when the hero group, the circus bugs, save the little Princess Dot. So they have these really good values, right? They care about each other. They care about each other's lives. They're not, the reason they dislike Flick isn't just because like, he's different and we don't like that. It's because his actions actually did endanger the whole colony, right? His invention went haywire, made all of their food stores go away, and meant that the grasshoppers were going to hurt them. So they were scared, not because they're scared of something new, but because they actually had a reason to be scared. And that's why it makes it more powerful when they go through this whole experience and learning that actually it's not that Flick is just like the smartest, best individual of the ant colony. It's that when we mix, his ingenuity and this idea of change and different, like doing something different from the status quo with all of us working together and caring about each other, that's how they defeat the grasshoppers. Like they see actually at the end, they see Flick getting beaten up and they get enraged and they're like, they don't want that to happen to him. And as he's like, pointing out that like, hey, actually the grasshoppers are afraid of the workers, which is really funny because this is like, this is like a very anti-capitalist.
Bug's Life is a pro-communism, and it's like not even communism, like but
collectivism, right? Like whatever.
The idea that the diversity of our voices actually lends strength to the collective. Yeah,
right, exactly. So like when at the end, it's that all the ants together actually can work. Like when they stay together, they can actually help each other and they can overcome their oppressor. And I think also like in the sort of the coda at the end where they're all happy and and like they're using Flick's inventions again. It's like the Flick's inventions actually work this time because it turns out he actually needed the colony to be able to like produce these, and
test
then also
and perfect the thing. Yeah,
test and perfect them, and also they use them for different things. They use them for like doing these like fireworks, right? So they look at his failure, right? Like this failure of like his device actually exploded their food, and they're like, okay, but we can actually use this for something fun. And it kind of shows this thing of like at the end when their labor is returned to them, unlike a B movie where it makes them lazy, it makes their society better. So they get the fruits of their labor. They have time for art. They have time to create art and to create festivals, and they innovate things that are beautiful. And I think that's a really lovely message at the end of A Bug's Life.
Definitely. And the fact that the arcs are split, like you mentioned, like B movie is only Jerry Seinfeld's arc. It's like, what's going to happen to him? And it trickles down. Everything that happens to him affects his society this way. Whereas in A Bug's Life, Flick gains acceptance of his group. Ada learns to lead the group. Dot learns to fly. Everyone has their own shit going on, and then together they all contribute to a collective narrative as well.
Right.
Pixar's great.
yeah, where it's like, it's not like it's this idea of like individuals are important because their lives are important, but it doesn't mean that you don't work together, because it's like the reason that everyone ends up working together in that movie is because they care about the individual. Like they work together to save the queen. Like they care about the queen, but then because you could dismiss that as, oh, of course they care about the queen because she's the queen. They also work together when Flick is in danger. So it's like this idea of like, okay, yeah, they're actually banding together. They see the value of the individual and they work together to, make save the lives of the individuals and to make all of their lives better. And I think that's really nice, because I think when people, the inverse point of these other crappy bug movies is like collectivism is bad because it forgets the individual. And then in A Bug's Life, it's like, communities working together is good because they embrace the individual. They embrace the individual, and they care about the individual, and when you work together to overcome an oppressor, your anger is actually like, it's established like at the beginning, like their conflict and their anger at Flick is misguided. It's misguided aggression, because like their problem really isn't Flick, although he does kind of fuck it up at the beginning. He does a real oopsie goofer with the food. Right. But their real problem isn't like this one oopsie goofer. Their real problem is with the oppressor. And when they learn to stop that's another interesting lesson, where it's like, when the oppressor turns the oppressed against each other and they work against each other, but then once they learn, hey, actually we're all oppressed by the same forces and we all work together, and then we can overcome it. And then, of course, the other plots in the movie are good. Like the love story between Flick and Ada is, heartwarming, because it's not based on Flick kidnapping her and her getting Stockholm syndrome like in Antz. And it's not this bizarre, just like B wants to fuck a human.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I did want to mention, I teased this earlier, but the most accurate part of a bee movie is the fact that the bee wants to fuck a human, because bees can be really dumb when it comes to mating. And if they see anything vaguely bee-shaped, they will try to have sex with it. Like with orchids, there are orchids that have evolved to exploit this. Yeah, they look vaguely bee-shaped, and the bees are too dumb to realize that this is an orchid, not another bee. So then they try to mate with the orchid, and it pollinates the orchid, and the bees just get
just imagining a bee going to town and an orchid thinking, you sucker, I totally got you, bitch. And just really smug about it.
Horny
these horny bee idiots, I totally got you.
Yeah.
Also, the more I think about the spider character's human-like hands, the creepier it gets. That's the one thing I don't like about Bug's Life.
In A Bug's Life.
In A Bug's Life. The Black Widow the Black Widow's front two legs at the end have 3-fingered hands. I don't like that. I don't want that to be
spiders
true.
Don't have fingers. They do have like little sort of
pincer.
Yeah, they have like little extrusions on their legs.
I don't like that. I don't want to know about that.
You just don't like spiders, man.
Yeah, I'm not a spider fan. I think Charlotte's Web, probably the only empathetic spider character I can think of in existence.
What about jumping spiders?
Are likable? You think they're cute and likable? Okay.
Yes.
Fine.
Okay, I'm gonna
Katie and I agree on
the
cute. We both seem to think things are cute that aren't
the
rest of people. Yeah, I think like cockroaches are cute.
I disagree on that.
Insane. Yeah, that's like you're just trying to piss me off.
They're like running up walls and shit. Like,
I pick up a lot
disgusting.
I pick up a lot of animals by like hand. I'm not upset about spiders. There are very few insects that I dislike, but I do dislike cockroaches.
They give you that gut feeling of like, ooh,
disgust. Yeah. Like it's
they're
funny
greasy
because, like,
looking too.
Because like I've literally found like scorpions and gone like, well now I've got to try to relocate this scorpion, or like, find like a venomous spider or something, and then I'll be bummed that I have to kill it.
Like this poor spider. Yeah. Right.
Like I get upset. Like I found a wasp in our apartment and I had to kill it because I couldn't. It was in an awkward position where I couldn't like get a glass over it and release it. And I felt really sad. Like I felt super bummed. I don't like killing insects. Cockroaches, like when I find them, like I kind of do the girly kind of like, ah! And like just don't. It's I hate it.
You kill it and you feel nothing.
Well, I don't like to kill them not because I feel empathetic towards them, which I don't, but because it's disgusting. Like I hate the mess they leave behind.
They're full of pus. Yeah,
that's actually terrible. Fat. Yeah, that white stuff is like
it's
fat.
like animal fat. That's their fatty
it's
tissue.
Insect. Ugh. Yeah, it's like fatty
fat,
fluids.
Yeah.
And I once found a giant cockroach in an old apartment, and like I got a glass jar and just like got it inside the glass jar and threw the whole glass jar in the dumpster because I couldn't deal with it. Once I got in the glass jar, I was like, well, I'm never opening this again. And so just threw it away.
The most hellish thing I've ever seen, I think, and I would stare at it in fascination for minutes at a time, was there was an apartment where Jen and I lived that had a terrible fly problem, and we ended up putting up one of those, the bags that you hang, and they smell literally like shit. They smell like feces, and it attracts flies, and they fly in and they can't get out, right? So there were so many flies there that the bag filled up with flies and fly corpses to the point that it created an ecosystem. So there were like flies fucking in the bag of fly corpses, and then they would give birth to maggots, and the maggots would eat all the dead flies and like live full cycles in this bag. And I would stare at it and imagine like, that's hell.
Why didn't you get rid of
life finds a
That's
way,
what
baby.
hell is. If I die and go to hell, it will be this. It'll be being in a big
fire.
bag.
God, no.
Terrible.
That's where we came from. It connects us to the universe.
All life is just goo.
According to all known laws of aviation, flies shouldn't be able to fuck in a giant corpse
fuck
pile.
In a bag, but they can. Isn't that inspiring?
Ugh, gross.
Honey is funny.
Thank you, Abe, for saving the podcast, as you always do.
Don't you think I look fly? Seinfeld fly says as he fucks a dead corpse of another fly.
But he's eyeballing the corpse of a human. That's how you know.
Yeah.
Well, it's an 18-year-old.
That's actually somewhat accurate, isn't it? Flies do love dead bodies.
Speaking of accurate bees, I promised myself I wouldn't go this whole podcast without mentioning, Katie, have you ever read the comic book Clan Apis?
No.
It's a very realistic comic, like graphic novel from the point of view of a bee done by an entomologist. That's super dope.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sounds really interesting.
I recommend
check it out. Yeah.
Clan Apis.
I'm hoping that the bees are female.
Yeah, they're all female. I think it's accurate. I think it's pretty accurate. Hey, Toy Story's trending on Twitter right now.
What?
Yeah, it's 25 years old.
Speaking of Pixar. Oh, okay. All right. Well, there you go.
Oh, this is nice. I'm looking up pictures of Clan Apis, and there's like one of a bee on top of a ball of dung that a dung beetle is rolling. So I think I would like this.
I think you would. It's pretty sweet. I definitely whiled away some lunches in high school learning about bees from it.
Yeah, that is really cool. I do like another thing. I think that another sort of trope about bees is that like it sucks to be the worker bee and it's good to be the queen bee kind of thing. Whereas like when you actually look at the hive structure, the queen bee has to be constantly giving birth. So that seems,
which is not not my ideal career.
Doesn't seem ideal. I mean, like, and the whole reason all of these sister bees work together is this complex math of their relatedness to each other and the offspring of the queen versus like their own offspring. And it's actually, it's like one of those things where it's like, oh man, it's like they're in this basically unfair society. And it's like, no, it's not like unfair. It's just that's how they survive as a species, and their quality of life such that a bee can experience. Like a worker bee, I don't think has a worse life than the queens or even the males that just like, sure, they don't have to work, but then they go have sex once and then explode. Their dicks fall off. Like
they're all working hard. Basically, they're all contributing.
I think, one thing we can all agree is life is suffering.
Definitely bee life.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's one of those circle of life things. I thought it was interesting. Even though A Bug's Life we have identified as the clear favorite of the bug movies, it's still interesting to me that the resolution is, well, birds are even bigger than them and scarier. So like in the end, ultimately the resolution is our problems exist on an even grander scale that threatens the oppressors above us. So like our salvation is that there's always a bigger oppressor out there, which is kind of a hollow victory. It's kind of a grim assessment of like, well, at least there's bigger things that will kill the things that kill us.
Yeah. No, that is interesting, right? Like that is a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina or Deus Ex Avia. Yeah. But
it's more Cloud Atlas than anything.
I did find
I just
strange.
Watched that. Let's talk about Cloud Atlas for 3 hours.
Real quick.
I did find it a little bit disconcerting that the birds in A Bug's Life were like didn't seem sentient, and like that sends me off on a whole like tunnel of like
that's a crazy like why are they not anthropomorphic? What does that mean? Yeah, that's weird.
It could be like I guess my theory is that the bird, it's not that so insects are able to have human levels of thought. Birds have to, because birds are much smarter than insects. They've actually, it's got to be, I mean, if we're going accurately, then that would mean birds are just like an alien intelligence that is just so incredly.
Birds are like a beautiful mind seeing calculus go by their head. Yeah.
Right.
See, that's my my preferred approach to Pixar films and the like is that there's like subsections. There aren't languages as much as subsections of like intelligence that kind of understand each other, that understand the world in the same way. So it's not that the birds aren't intelligent. They just like birds, like, I don't know, maybe they can talk to cats or something.
Operate at a different plane.
But it's just like we're operating on different frequencies in terms of like, even if we can understand. It's just one of those suspension of disbelief things. You're going to have to draw a line at some point.
Like A Bug's
Otherwise,
Life.
you get into the bee movie problem, which is just
this
suddenly
is
a bee talks and everyone's like, what the fuck?
And it's like, it's bee law not to talk to humans, and it's never explained why. It's just...
that bothered me so much. Is like, for what reason? Yeah,
well, that's the problem. That's the problem when you like create a story where it's just like, and then we want them to try to fuck, who was the actress who did the voice of
Renee Zellweger.
Was it? It was Zellweger?
Yeah, it was Renee Zellweger.
Oh yeah, she sounded a little drunk throughout the whole movie, which bless her. Like, I would
whatever you got to
too.
do to get through it. Yeah.
Like, she's like, okay, and what role am I playing? Oh, a human that fucks a bee. All right, well, I'm just gonna get
pour some wine right now.
Pour some wine.
Put on my PJ pants. We'll get this thing.
We'll get this.
Wish I was in A Bug's Life.
Get it in one take. Yeah, I mean, No, I dig that, where it's like basically just you don't have to. I don't like it when they spent so long in a bee movie just like, oh, the bee is talking to the human and the human is like, oh my god. Like, you don't. I like it when movies don't have to like go through these like explainer things of like, all right, here's how our dumb cobbled together universe works. Now we're gonna joke about how stupid it is. Mm-hmm. It's like, you made it. You made your universe this stupid, and now you're gonna joke about how dumb it is.
Right.
Frankly, even Toy Story 1 suffers a little bit from that. Like, if you, even as a kid or a younger person seeing Toy Story 1, I thought to myself, that doesn't work. When they explained like, well, the toys all just fall over when the human comes in. And I'm like, that wouldn't work. People all over the world would notice that their toys moved around magically when they were out of the room. There's no... Anyway.
I think it's over time we got acclimated to the trope, and then likewise writers and, producers of these films
push the trope further because
push the trope further, and also don't learn not to ask those questions because they also have problems with it. It's like, it's not like it's just like someone comes up with an idea and then everyone's just like, yep, that's the idea. It's like, oh yeah, that's true, that doesn't really make sense. Do we kind of just, are we fine with it? Are we
because it's movies?
Yeah, we're fine with it. And other times they're like, nah, we should think of something better.
They could do the old Exorcist sort of logic where the children have to have imaginations in order for the toys to actually be alive. So if the toys actually showed the children they were alive, the children would stop imagining, and then that would actually kill the toys. Sort of like where the demon Satan challenges the priest to throw the cross away, and when the priest doesn't, it shows that the priest doesn't actually have faith in the cross, and then that the demon can eat him, or I forgot what actually happened. Like,
that's right. The toys are like the devil, and Buzz Lightyear sucks cocks in hell. That's Toy Story in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think
Happy
25th.
I have a question. So I was pleased, as we aforementioned, that the ant colony in Bug's life is just dirt. Like, it's just caves of dirt, which at least is a little more realistic than the hive in a bee movie, which is filled with pneumatic tubes. But by the same token, I was wondering, wouldn't a real ant colony be full of corpses? Like in A Bug's Life, shouldn't they be crawling all over dead ants the whole time?
Actually, some of the ants' jobs are to clear corpses out of the colony. So no.
They don't let the corpses just fall where they lay?
No, they will clean corpses out of the colony, yeah.
Oh, I always thought that ant colonies, like the walls were made up of the dead, just fall where they fall.
No, that's sort of more of a catacomb, sort of like a French catacomb kind of situation where you just like build the ants into the
Exactly.
The walls.
That's what I thought ants did, because I was like, what would they? That's amazing to me that they actually have the wherewithal to be like, we don't want these corpses here. Let's move them.
They're very fastidious. I mean, like, it keeps it clean, keeps any I would assume like any sort of ant disease that may have gotten those ants like from spreading.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, and they have they're actually quite organized. They have different chambers that like some chambers that will hold like the nurseries. They'll have food storage areas. They have like these long passageways called galleys where they walk around in hallways, and it's actually quite organized and quite clean.
And do they cannibalize dead ants or no?
I think it kind of depends. Like they will, I think sometimes
depends if they have food problems.
I'm not sure. I know that they will consume they'll basically consume excess protein when they can. I don't know that they actually eat dead ants all that much, just because I don't know that they have that much left in them. Like they probably already have like all of the actual useful juices probably no longer exist. They probably do. I'm just guessing, like if a larva dies, they probably would cannibalize that, because that's a lot of nice
and protein.
Yeah, it's a lot of nice juicy protein. But yeah, they basically, like, it's similar like with I would assume with bees, which I know a little more about, where like when there's problems with a hive, like when there's some kind of like weird defects or something, they will consume that excess protein by cannibalizing and using it. So
all right, ants are even less creepy than I thought. Rad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
A
also
bug question?
about A Bug's Life.
Yes, you in the back.
I kind of fancy myself a bug guy.
Oh, here he goes.
Especially
this
guy.
I'm a bug and ants, and one of my favorite facts about ants is like the North American ant was kind of pushed out by the Argentinian ant.
Yeah.
And the only real difference between the two species is the ratio of like queen to rest of the colony. Like it's like 1 to 1,000. So there's just more queens in one,
in the Argentinian
species. And then that makes them easier to, like, if they get half of their colony gets uprooted or something, they can still exist. Whereas if you kill like, if it's like 1 to 1,000,000 and you get the queen, they have complete colony degradation.
I have found hot tip
spins out of control.
The same is true of chess. If you play with 4 queens, you do much better.
You do much better.
Well, you
so
can.
my question
Gotta get
is
those
that
pawns over there. Sneak them over.
in A Bug's Life, you have not 1 but 3 generations of queen, and I thought that was interesting because you have Dot and you have
Ada and you have Phyllis Diller.
Yeah, exactly. So you had like, you already see the kind of princess to queen in this metaphor. Does that ever happen? Do they like bunch up queens, and do like queens sometimes never become queens? Does that make sense? Does my question
make
sense?
Do the queens train each other? Do the queens compete with each other? Or is it a smooth system where it's like there's one queen and then it transitions to the next
I thought it was
queen?
like when a queen is dying, they will have a queen kind of idea.
Yeah, so
do you know?
So it is actually hereditary. So you will have all the ants are sisters. So all the worker ants are sisters, and the queen is constantly pumping out more sisters and a few useless brothers who will just basically fly off and mate at one point in their life. But like useless brothers, but but
their dicks explode, whatever. Fuck them.
Stupid ass.
Fuck those guys.
Man.
But they'll feed based on what they feed, like the kind of, I think basically like what they feed the developing larvae. Some will develop into queens, and those queens are basically like also sisters to, like, when there's a new queen, it's just basically a sister who is happens to be able to mate, and so that new queen will either disperse or stay in the colony for a while. So I'm trying to remember when the situations when, like,
are there ever 2 queens that vie for the control of the hive? Is there ever a conflict, or does it not work like that?
Like,
I'm actually not sure. I know in eusocial mammals that can happen. Like in meerkats, there can actually be these like like in any animal system where there's like when there's like a female, a dominant female, or even a dominant male and like one breeding male or female in a group, like they're always like trying to vie for power. And the difference with bees and ants is that they are, because they're so related, it's unusual that they would need to compete. In terms of, I think that ants do generally like disperse and stuff. That I think like a new queen can take over an old queen's ant colony, but I don't know if that would be the queen's daughter or just like a new queen, basically.
Yeah. I find this fascinating, as I do your podcast, because that's what your podcast talks about.
That's right. This is kind of a hybrid creature feature / frame rate.
She came to us with this idea, and we were just like,
that sounds keen.
This sounds great.
Yeah.
Gee willikers.
But for more great, animal facts that I assume Katie is not Googling live as she records the podcast, you got to check out Creature Feature Pod.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I might just do a whole episode on fact-checking B-movie.
That would be
so
delightful.
Egregious.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I had a blast when I was on just recently. We talked about crabs.
We did.
It was great. Yeah.
We had Bridget on as well.
Oh.
Yes, we did.
Michael, I've invited you before.
Well,
haven't I?
Get me in there.
Well, come on, get in there.
Unless I've glossed over it, I don't think I've done Creature Feature.
Yeah, I don't think you have done it yet.
But in spirit, you've always been there.
In spirit, my doors, I leave a seat open for you.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
It's a Jewish thing. It's a bee-ish thing.
Have you covered dogs yet?
I mean, there's always more stuff to talk about with dogs. So why don't next time I do a dogs episode, I'm going to have you on.
No, have me on for...
I didn't get to choose mine. You don't get to choose yours.
All right, she chooses. I
don't
know the system.
It's Katie's show.
But see, I'm the Antz who's trying to prove that individuality beats conformity. I'm not going to follow her format.
Happening? It's getting too meta.
We're trying to plug. What's happening is we're trying to plug your podcast, but it's not going great.
Trying to corral Michael is just like...
We do think people should hear it.
If you want to hear a podcast where I talk about animals and how cool they are and how they're similar to humans and sometimes dissimilar to humans, check it out. I also talk about a lot of fun, gross stuff like poop and weird mating, and I'll have Michael on for either an episode about dogs or poop.
Poop would be good. Yeah, poop's also fine.
I just, off the top of my head, just poop. Why not? Love it.
45 minutes.
Thank you for stopping by, Katie.
It was a true pleasure.
This was a blast. I love this. I didn't talk that much because I was just like, this is fascinating. We got it in the can.
Yeah, I love we snuck bug stuff into our movie podcast. I love bug stuff.
You like Jones?
Well, I want to thank everyone who's listening, and I guess that's a sewed.
It is indeed. Can I get a you like jazz on 3 from all of us?
Sure.
1, 2, 3. You like jazz? This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.